Or an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway...
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs and Co. Well, what can I say, Starmer? Have you been following his 5-point plan? Today's focus is all about houses. Apparently, we need more of them, and apparently Labour are the party to make it happen. He says that he will basically overhaul the planning system in this country. Is that the answer? And by the way, it's all well and good, isn't it, building more houses, but do you reckon you'd even be able to afford one in the first place? And what on earth is going on? Do you remember the teacher in Batley, who still, by the way, is in hiding? Well, a mere, 20-odd minutes drive away, we now have a situation where you've got 4 kids that have been suspended in Wakefield because a copy of the Quran was damaged. What on earth is going on? I mean, I have to say, last time I looked, I think blasphemy laws were outlawed in about 2008, wasn't there? Very strange, I can tell you. We'll be getting into that one. And I've got an answer. It's going to fix so many of the problems that we're experiencing at the moment in the public sector. Are you ready for it? It's very simple. Performance-related pay. Do you think that is what we need to tackle all these backlogs, which, quite frankly, are everywhere? Well, a collection of job centres are trialling that as we speak imminently. Will that fix Britain's woes? And bins. I told you yesterday I wanted to talk rubbish with you, but I was rudely interrupted by our Prime Minister talking about the Windsor framework. So tonight I'll be picking that back up. What do you make to the goings-on when it comes to waste collection in this country? You've got to now get appointments to go to skips. You've got goodness knows how many bins. Whose responsibility is it to recycle things? We'll have all of that to come and more, but first let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story on GB News tonight. A couple that went missing with their newborn baby in January have been further arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon were found in Brighton yesterday and were initially arrested on suspicion of child neglect. More than 200 police officers are searching a 91 square mile area to try to find the 2-month-old baby. Sussex police say they're making assessments about the baby's welfare on an hourly basis.
I think whilst we still have hope that the baby can be found safe and well, we must retain that hope. And as you see, the number of officers we have deployed on that open search. However, as time progresses, as the weather is closing tonight, as it was last night, in terms of the coldness and the impact that would have on a baby, clearly the risk is getting higher, and we have to be open to the fact that this may not end in the way we would like.
Well, in other news today, the Prime Minister visited Northern Ireland to try to convince unionists to support his new trade deal with the EU. Rishi Sunak insists the so-called Windsor Framework addresses concerns around the Northern Ireland Protocol and urged the DUP to return to power sharing at Stormont. The deal removes barriers on trade across the Irish Sea and allows Stormont to veto EU laws affecting the flow of goods. But still, it includes a role for the European Court of Justice. Tory backbenchers and the DUP are still reviewing the detail.
If there's a significant EU law that comes along that will have lasting and significant impact on the everyday lives of people here in Northern Ireland, that the Assembly will be allowed to pull the emergency brake. And it's built on something called the Petition of Concern mechanism, which is a Good Friday Agreement institution, requires the support of 30 MLAs from 2 parties. And once that's done, to be crystal clear, the UK government then does have an unequivocal veto. And what I've said is that the UK government wants to sit down with the parties in Northern Ireland, the Assembly, to codify how the UK government would use that veto.
Thousands of teachers are striking across England and Wales for 3 days this week in their ongoing dispute over pay. The National Education Union says schools in the north of England are restricting access for pupils or fully closing schools. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan has called the action unforgivable and said children deserve to be in class. Union members in the Midlands and the East will join the picket line tomorrow, with more walkouts in Wales and the south of England on Thursday. And the capital is facing significant disruption on the day of the Chancellor's budget, as tens of thousands of public sector workers go on strike. 33,000 members of the Public and Commercial Services Union, which represents government departments, Border Force and the DVLA, will all walk out on the 15th of March. And they'll join 100,000 civil servants already due to strike that day, alongside London Underground staff, with the union ASLEF in separate disputes. It's been confirmed that the husband of Epsom College's head teacher died of a single gunshot wound, according to a coroner's inquest today in Surrey. George Pattinson is believed to have murdered his wife, Emma, and their 7-year-old daughter, Letty, before killing himself. The 3 were found dead in their home in the grounds of the prestigious school in Surrey earlier this month, along with a firearm which was legally registered to Mr. Pattinson. Grocery price inflation has reached a new record high of 17.1%. Analyst Kantar says this means an average increase of £811 to annual household shopping bills. Products such as milk, eggs and margarine have seen the fastest rise in costs. The impact of vegetable and fruit shortages is not yet included in the new figures. 3 energy companies are to bring a High Court challenge against the sale of collapsed company Bulb to Octopus Energy. Lawyers representing Scottish Power, British Gas and E.ON all claim there are serious public interest and legal issues with the deal. They're challenging 2 decisions by the government, who approved the takeover and increased a loan to help with the transfer. Bulb went into administration at the end of 2021 with around 1.6 million customers on its books. And 2 British-trained police dogs will be flown to Thailand to help crack down on the smuggling of pangolins. The critically endangered species are the most trafficked mammal in the world, according to the World Wildlife Fund. The Labradors, Buster and Bess, have gone through 8 weeks of training with London's Metropolitan Police. In Thailand, the dogs will be sniffing for pangolins being smuggled through airports, ports and by road. That's your latest news. I'm back in an hour. See you then.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I'm Michelle Dewbs and I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got Emma Burnell, the political consultant, and Toby Young, the director of the Free Speech Union. Good evening to both of you. Look how smart Toby Young looks today, everybody. If you are listening on the radio and you can't see him, well, You look very dapper. I've asked him, has he been in court today? He says no. I asked him then, are you dressed up specifically just for me tonight? He also said no, but I think he might be fibbing. I think he's just going out tonight, though, so he told me. Anyway, you know the drill on Dewbs and Co, don't you? It's not just about us three here in the studio. It's very much about you guys at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch with me all the usual ways. GBviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at GBnews. You've already started doing that. You're very keen, you guys. Oliver says, Michelle, please can you wish my age, mad old parents a happy birthday, he says. Dad's was yesterday and his mum's is today. Apparently they're big admirers of the show and will be watching as we speak. That's very sensible. What a way to spend your birthday, watching Dewbs and Co. I massively approve of that, so happy birthday to you. Also as well, I'll do a quick shout out to Patrick the taxi driver. I had the pleasure of his company today as well, and he is listening as we speak as well. So hello to all of you, quite frankly, tonight, wherever you are. Let's get into it then, shall we? Keir Starmer reckons that he is going to overhaul the planning system if he gets into power. He will build more, apparently, in 7 years, then get this, than have been built in the last 30 years put together, pretty much. You know, he's saying at the moment, Keir Starmer, that this scheme that we have, it basically favours the wealthy, and that many people are indeed struggling, which we know to be true. Is this the answer, just to build more, Emma?
It's definitely a massive part of the answer. We haven't built nearly enough under successive governments. We didn't build enough under the last Labour government. We haven't built enough in the last 12 years either. And a great deal of that are massive, massive problems with the planning system. It's incredibly difficult to get planning permission to build decent amount of homes and the infrastructure that's needed to support them. We need many, many more homes, and this is something that is now being championed on the right as well as the left. And there are great arguments on both sides for it. It's just simply the case that we have a big housing crisis. We have more and more people who are in insecure homes, who are renting well into their 30s and 40s, when it just used to be the case that that was something you did in your 20s, maybe early 30s. We have a massive imbalance in the ability for people to have security. And security is what a home quite often can bring you. When you own your own home, you have a certain amount of security you don't have as a renter. We need to expand that opportunity to so many more people. And this is a big part of doing that, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you say it's really difficult to get planning permission. On my way into the studio, I can't help but notice, and I accept it's London, but there are cranes everywhere, Toby, building tower blocks of goodness knows how many apartments, and I look at them and I think to myself, it's all well and good building these things, but who on earth can actually afford them? And by the way, I get stuck in traffic pretty much every single day because of these developments of closed pavements and reduced roads to one lane and whatever, and I sit and I think some developers are getting very wealthy indeed off the back of my and everyone else's congested traffic trouble. Anyway, I digress. What do you make to it?
Yeah, I share your scepticism. Where I live in West London, tower blocks are going up all the time. 2 have appeared in the last couple of months, and there's one being built on the corner of my street. There's another one just on the corner of where I get on the train, Acton Mainline Station. And, you know, Keir Starmer says that he wants more wind farms, and the reason there are more wind farms is because of our planning system. I mean, it suggests he never leaves the Westminster bubble. Anywhere you go in England, the landscape is completely disfigured by these echo crucifixes. So the idea that we need even more and they're being held
echo
up
crucifix, I've never heard them called that.
But I think
a
more serious point is that, you know, successive governments have come into power or included in their manifesto a pledge to liberalise the planning system so they can solve the housing crisis by building more houses. And none of them have managed to do it. Why? Because it's unpopular. It's not universally unpopular, but it's unpopular enough for it to be politically very difficult. He's going to have to win a stonking majority if he's going to overhaul the planning system, because even Labour MPs in some constituencies, they have a lot of voters who don't want development to take place in their backyard. They don't want the disruption, they don't want the noise, they don't want the dirt, they don't want the parking restrictions. They particularly don't want, if they live in rural areas, they don't want their views disfigured by, you know, echo crucifixes, amongst other things. So politically, it's incredibly difficult. It's all very well to promise this kind of thing, but unless he wins an absolute stonking majority, and I don't think he will, let's say he's in a coalition with the Lib Dems, they're not going to allow him to liberalise the planning system. Half their voters are NIMBYs, so I don't think it's going to happen.
But do you think it's fair, Emma, to be a so-called NIMBY? So if you save up, you buy this lovely house, I don't know, wherever, and then apparently there's 4 houses on your street, so you think, oh yeah, that's nice and relaxing, chill out there. And then, oh, actually, no, there's not 4. We've now got planning permission to build a whole new development there, an estate there. Now one around the corner there, now one around the corner there. Wouldn't you be in your rights to say, actually, no, hang on a second, I don't want that?
We need to have planning that works for people, but we cannot simply stop, have this small cadre of people who can pass their homes down and stop everybody else from having any opportunity. And we are all Londoners. We're all so our view of this is a little skewed.
I do not regard myself as a Londoner.
You just talked about your London-based problems on getting in here. That's what I mean.
I commute to my London-based studio.
But this is what I mean. What we need to do, and what's really important actually, is to make sure that we're building homes and the infrastructure that supports them and the jobs and opportunities everywhere, so that it's not just about tower blocks going up for the rich in London, but actually the homes that people need near where they grew up, so that they can stay in the communities they grew up in. And that is a really big important part of this. So there is going to be a certain amount of fighting back against NIMBYism. Now, Toby's right in a way. It is politically difficult, which is why I think you do it early, because if Keir Starmer gets any sort of majority, stonking or otherwise, going early is when you have the goodwill and when you can get it done earlier in a term, so that by that point the pain point has been passed. That's how politics tends to work cyclically. So I think coming out and saying this now, before the election, is actually quite an important way of putting down a marker that it will be a high priority, rather than something that slips down the political agenda.
If you're sitting at home and you want to crunch some numbers and you're thinking, well, how many houses are being built, by the way? 204,000, just over, actually, dwellings were completed in the UK, the year ending March 2022. But many people will say, actually, it doesn't matter how many you build, because actually, the population seems to be increasing left, right and centre. So will you ever have enough properties?
Well, one obvious solution to the housing crisis, perhaps not the complete solution, would be to actually admit fewer people into the country. With 500,000 new arrivals in the past 12 months, it's not surprising that there's a housing crisis.
Well, yeah, exactly.
But we also have a demographic squeeze. We have an ageing population. We need young people in secure homes, able to do the jobs that we are just not filling at the moment. Now, whether that's from abroad, whether it's one of the things that we've talked about in the last week is the fact that people aren't getting married or having children earlier. One of the reasons for that is they're not living in secure housing. So if you want to have a lower immigration system, you need to have the kind of conditions where we are refilling our own workforce naturally internally. Now, I'm fairly liberal on immigration. Of course I am. That's one of the things that I believe in. But I think there's a right-wing closed-door argument for also building more houses to ensure that younger people feel comfortable and safe enough to have children earlier.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of young people, by the way, that don't make responsible decisions in terms of when to have children. They don't sit there and think, can I afford this? What they do is they think, actually, I'll have this kid and the taxpayer will pick up the bill. So there's a whole different conversation about that side of things. You mentioned passing down houses, people passing down the houses to their kids. You wouldn't resent that, though, surely?
I don't resent people passing down their houses as long as they pay the tax on it. No, not at all. It's not about...
tax?
Well, the estate tax. If the house is worth over $250,000, then you pay a certain amount of tax on it.
Inheritance tax.
Inheritance tax,
yeah.
I'd
get rid of that.
But, basically, all you're doing then is making rich people much, much richer without them doing any work for it, and then keeping the rest of us locked out of the housing market. You've got to have a balance in these things.
I would. I'd get rid of inheritance tax, and I would get rid of stamp duty as well, talking specifically. Do you know how much this country raised? £14.3 billion in the year 21 to 2022 in stamp duty. And I think, why should, if you want to buy a home to live in and settle down and feel safe and do all the things that Emma just said, why should you have to repeatedly pay these stamp duty tax every time you move, etc., to have a home?
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and I'm with you also on inheritance tax. I mean, the people have already paid tax on the income they use to purchase their homes.
Yes.
So why should they have to pay tax on it again when they pass it on to their children? It should be something that they own outright and can pass on to their children untethered. And often the burden falls on the children. They can't afford to pay the estate tax, and so they end up having to sell the house.
Yeah, that's sensible, that, isn't it, Emma, scrapping inheritance tax?
No, not at all, because those children have done nothing to earn that money. Now, we should, of course, pass some stuff down to our kids. That's natural human instinct. But we need to make sure that we have an economic system that doesn't just concentrate wealth into the smaller and smaller areas of those families.
I know, but
and actually spreads it around to the rest of us.
But as we just described, though, these assets are bought from post-tax monies. So taxes have already been claimed on the money that was used to purchase said assets in the first
And then just
place.
given to the next generation, because those houses go up in value. My house, which is a small 2-bedroom flat, has doubled in value in the last 10 years. I've done nothing to earn that money. I don't, so why...
But Emma, it might have halved in value. You know, you gambled when you bought it. It's paid off. But
it might have done.
Because
and I would then,
you wouldn't get any
there would
money
be less
back
tax for whoever's going to inherit my house. No, I'm childless, so my niece and nephew are in for a big bonus when I go off. Don't tell them.
Give it to your favourite GB News presenter. You can give it to me. And by the way, we talk about property being a gamble. All you've got to do is ask the people at Croydon Council, a little bit off topic, but look at the state of their finances, given a lot of the commercial property investments that they did. Not very investment, if you ask me. But anyway, right, I will take a quick break. Oh, actually, no, well, I'll talk about what you guys are saying. Colin says, we can't keep building housing, Michelle. New homes means losing land that could produce food. We already import too much of our food. He says it's all about policies, bringing them in to stop the increase in population. Colin, do you mean stop the increase in population, i.e. do you want to have like a one-child policy like China, or do you mean controlling the immigration flow? I suspect it's the latter, but you can get in touch and tell me. Matt says, how does net zero fit in with their plans to concrete over the countryside? Jones says, cover the country with housing and concrete and then wait for the floods and then they could all sit down and blame climate change. Phil says, how far is all this house building going to go? Eventually all villages and towns will be ruined and the whole country will become one big massive housing estate. Is that what we all want? I don't know. Is it? You tell me. Right, I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll speak to you about something that certainly got me concerned. You might not have read much about it, really. This is a school in Wakefield, about a 30-minute drive from Batley. You remember that school there as well? Anyway, now 4 kids have been suspended because a little bit of minor damage to the Quran. Last time I looked, we don't have blasphemy laws in this country, so what on earth is going on? We'll look at that in a couple of minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewbs, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. Alongside me, I've got Emma Burnell, a political consultant, and Toby Young, the director of the Free Speech Union. We've just been talking about housing and what is going on with that. Keir Starmer's promises that he's going to sort it all out, in short. One of my viewers has just got in touch saying, Michelle, the answer to this is to stop people buying properties just to keep empty. I think you make an interesting point there, because I don't think you should ever have a scenario where some random in Hong Kong or whatever can buy these properties off plan just to sit there as an appreciating asset. I do share your sentiment and your thoughts with that. Many of you just keep saying, at what point do we stop building houses? Well, that will be at a point that we are not yet at. Right, let's move on. Talk about a situation that certainly got me concerned. It won't have escaped your notice, the fact that we do not have a blasphemy law in this country. I repeat, we do not have a blasphemy law in this country. However, that fact seems to have escaped a few people, so it does, because you'll all remember the situation in Batley, where a school teacher is still in hiding. Well, a mere 20 or so minutes drive away from there, over in Wakefield, we've now found ourselves in a situation where we've got 4 schoolboys who have been suspended after a copy of the Quran that they took into school was scuffed, it was mildly damaged, I would say. That's how I would describe it. Well, to say that this has kicked off is an understatement. I'll start with you on this, Toby. I find this very concerning. It's been whipped up into a frenzy. You've had a Labour councillor, he's put a statement up on Twitter. I mean, talk about an overreaction. He's saying, the school, by the way, is Kettlethorpe High School. He's saying a Quran has been desecrated. It's a serious provocation. Thank you, can't get my teeth in. He says it needs to be dealt with urgently by all the authorities, the police, the school, the local authority. He calls it a terrible action, terrible provocation, repeated over and over again. I mean, come on now. Toby Young, we've seen a scene now where these 4 kids have been kicked out. The mum of one of these kids, one of the kids, by the way, is, I quote, highly autistic. The mum has had to go to this mosque wearing a headscarf. And to me, it almost seems like she's begging for forgiveness, worried about her child's life. What do you make to all this?
No, it's really shocking. And to see scenes like this in 21st century Britain, it's like something out of, an 18th century fanatically religious society in which a mother is having to beg for the life of her child because he, in the course of playing a game, has desecrated some holy relic. It is absolutely extraordinary. And I think the reason why the mother has felt she's had to do this, kind of appear almost as a Muslim penitent in front of this mosque, not say anything, but by her actions essentially plead for clemency for herself and her child. The reason the counsellors are tiptoeing around it, the police are involved, even the head teacher has described the Quran as a holy book and condemned what happened to it as if it was some terrible crime. What they're all tiptoeing around is the threat posed by this mob. In the background, there is the spectre of this mob who may overreact, who may actually attack this child and his friends who may congregate outside the school. And, you know, that's the problem. That's the issue here. It's threatening a child, threatening a child's mother. That's what should be against the law. That's what the police should be investigating, not a 14-year-old autistic boy dropping a copy of the Quran on the ground. We shouldn't allow ourselves to be intimidated by religious mobs in 21st century Britain. We are a secular society. We've abolished blasphemy laws, as you said. We can't resurrect them like this just because there's a mob of unreasonable fanatics who are prepared to kill people who they think have offended, stepped on their sacred values.
Emma?
I mean, I pretty much agree. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in any God. I don't believe in any sacred text except possibly this one book that is called Fortunes, and I love it and I read it every year. But it's not actually a sacred text, and I wouldn't actually upset me if you dusted off my copy and threw it around a little. We need to be really, really conscious of not winding this up and making it worse. But there is a line that shouldn't be crossed, and that probably has been in terms of the community relations. I suspect these 4 lads have been actually suspended.
Just go back. What do you mean there's a line that's been crossed?
Well, let me. So these 4 lads have probably been suspended for what my head teacher would have called extreme wallydom, being a fanny in school, basically. And there are strict behaviour codes that they may or may not have broken. If they haven't broken, they shouldn't be suspended. They should not be suspended for challenging religion, whether that's in a mocking way or a 14-year-old way. Where the bigger problem lies is other people getting involved in this suspension in a school and making it a bigger story, stirring up community tensions. That tweet that you're talking about by that Labour councillor is ridiculous and should never have been tweeted by any public official.
Where's Keir Starmer then?
Well, I don't think Keir Starmer should be talking about an individual Labour councillors. I think, but if
really?
as I understand
you don't think
it,
that Keir Starmer should be condemning that statement?
I think that as I understand it, that statement's already been taken down, which speaks to me that there's internal action being taken. I don't know what that is, so I'm not going to spare comment on it. But if that statement has been immediately deleted by that councillor, that means someone's had a word, and good, they should have done.
Well, why wouldn't you have a public word then? When you've got 14-year-olds
because there's a disciplinary process. Because there's a disciplinary process to go to in terms of those public councillors. On the other hand, we should be saying you cannot incite mob violence, and we should be saying that loudly and publicly. And I think that is the right response. Mob violence is never right. I don't care what it is that you're upset about. Mob violence is not the answer.
One of the things that perplexes me a little bit is because I completely understand. I mean, my very best friend in the world is a Muslim, and I appreciate and respect the fact that to her and other people, the Quran is a very sacred text and all the rest of it, and the amount of respect and everything that goes with it. I get that. But I guess where I struggle a little bit is, why would anyone think that they have a right not to be offended? If something's sacred to you, and you're absolutely entitled for it to be sacred to you, and you're absolutely entitled to follow it to the letter and all the rest of it, brilliant, good for you. But what I find odd, uncomfortable, and I'll be honest, wrong, is that when you then expand that, and then what you say is, all of you lot have got to have exactly the same belief, the same principle and all the rest of it, that, for me, is wrong.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like you, I respect Islam. I understand the reverence for the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad. But to go beyond that and say, you have to observe the religious precepts that I observe, you have to observe the taboos that I as a Muslim observe, even if you're not a Muslim. The price of living in this country, which is a liberal society, is that you can't enforce your religious maxims, your religious taboos on people who don't share your religious beliefs. Just as Christians couldn't enforce their views, shouldn't persecute or threaten with death Muslims who may be slightly disrespectful towards the Bible or to the figure of Jesus Christ. One thing that really alarmed me about this, Michelle, is that the police officer said he reassured, I think when he was in front of the mosque with the counsellor and the mother, he reassured the congregants that this had been recorded as a hate incident. And one of the things the Free Speech Union has been campaigning against is what are called non-crime hate incidents, which is when the police investigate something that's happened that's been reported as a potential hate crime, conclude that no crime has actually been committed, but record it nonetheless as a hate incident, and they record it against your name in such a way that it can come up in an enhanced criminal records check, which can prevent you from getting a job as a teacher or a carer. Is this going to hang around this child's neck now for God knows how long, that he's committed a hate incident when all he did was have a copy of the Quran knocked out of his hand? I mean, we say we don't have blasphemy laws, but if the police are recording this in such a way that it's going to penalise you and jeopardise your career, then effectively we do have blasphemy laws.
And by the way, the 14-year-old lad, by the way, he's deeply apologetic. He didn't process, he didn't realise the upset it would cause. He's gone away, he's done a lot of reading, he's written a letter to his fellow Muslim classmates apologising for the upset. His mum's got wheeled out in front of the mosque. She's apologised to the thing. Even the school says there was no malicious intent. And by the way, you talk about hate crimes. If they're recording that, West Yorkshire Police, as a hate crime, I do hope they are also recording the death threats that this little boy has got. I hope that they're definitely recorded as hate crimes and definitely getting investigated as well. And I hope people, you say about people getting involved and all the rest of it, someone said that the Education Secretary should get involved and overturn that suspension. Yeah, actually, I think that's a pretty good idea. Lots of you have an opinion on that, and I'll be giving some of them. I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
hello there. I'm Michelle Dewbs and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. Emma Burnell is beside me, the political consultant, and alongside her is Toby Young, the director of the Free Speech Union. Lots of you guys getting in contact when it comes to free speech about that last topic, the goings-on in Wakefield with those kids being suspended. I've got to say, by the way, if it was any other religious text, any other, quite frankly, would it have got the same reaction? I say no. You lot have got a big reaction to it, so I'll be having some of that before the end of the show, so don't miss that. But for now, I think I've got an answer to a big problem in society. Basically, there's queues everywhere, there's backlogs everywhere. Try and get anything done, quite frankly, in this day and age, it seems to be an absolute hassle. Well, the government, they've come up with a bit of a plan on one sector anyway. Job centres is what I speak. What they're going to do now, they're going to have a league table, and if you do a good job and get people into work, get this, everyone, you'll get £250 a month in vouchers. The next best performing set of staff will get £125 each. Got me thinking this, Emma, so it did. Performance-related pay, I think it's quite a good idea, actually. I would look at rolling it out right across a variety of sectors, right across the whole, anywhere really, driving licences, whatever. If you actually do well, you get a reward. If you don't do very well, you don't do your job, guess what? I'd dock a bit of your wages. It's a good idea, that, isn't it?
It's not a terrible idea. I think it would cost us a fortune because actually you'd find more people are better at their jobs than we think they are. I've worked with...
I like your optimism.
I've worked with performance-related pay. I worked in sales for many, many years and got bonuses, and it is quite an incentivising thing. It's difficult to always work out what it is that you can incentivise in some jobs. And really? There are some... Yeah, because there are some jobs that, you know, how do you... if you're a cleaner and you clean something, how do you clean it 20% better? I mean, these are the things. So I think where you might struggle is what you do to lift people up that little bit further. How do you push them into the further incentives? I think there are definitely areas where performance-related pay can be really helpful. I think there are definitely a large swaths of the private sector I'd like to see performing better, and maybe we should be able to pay our gas bill 20% less if we don't think they're up to scratch. Maybe we could look at it in all different sectors, but I do think I'm not fundamentally against the idea. I'd like to see how it would work, particularly for people who are on more manual labour, more lower bands. How do you get them to get the bonuses that other people are getting?
Well, by the way, you wouldn't clean 20% better or more. You'd clean 20% faster, perhaps, would be one of the measures. But this whole notion of having a KPI, a key performance indicator, where you're saying to somebody, this is how I will measure you, I think it's very smart indeed.
Well, when in another life, Michelle, I co-founded 4 free schools, and I set up a multi-academy trust and became the chief executive of that multi-academy trust, and in that capacity looked at performance-related pay. Is this a good way of increasing teacher performance? And what we discovered, having researched it, was that instead of actually improving teacher performance, teachers just expect to get the performance bonus at the end of each year. And if you don't pay them the performance bonus, they're quite likely to get cross and leave. And because there's a shortage of teachers, it's a seller's market in that profession.
Yeah, but you'd agree the criteria and the measures at the start of it, right?
Yeah,
together.
But in something like teaching, it's quite hard to agree a fair criteria. Exactly how do you measure how much impact a teacher has made, given that in a lot of cases, you know, it's what's happening in the home environment, how much homework their parents are insisting they do. It's to do with how naturally bright they are in the first place. So it's kind of, there are so many variables, it's quite hard to measure performance. And what happens is that every teacher just expects the performance bonus at the end of each year. It's just priced in by them. And if they then don't get it, you're then in a world of pain. And I suspect something similar, in this case, it sounds like they've got a kind of pretty clear metric. Someone you've worked with gets a job, you get a bonus. But you can imagine that becoming a bit blurred. It requires a degree of kind of ruthless management, which I don't think is a hallmark of the public sector. And I expect what will happen in this job centre is that everybody at the end of the year will just get the performance bonus, regardless of how well or poorly they've done. done. That's the way these things tend to work, particularly, you know, when you have a labour market shortage. And, you know, in the public sector, there is generally a shortage of positions, a shortage of people to fill the jobs they need to fill.
Yeah, and you say that there's a shortage of ruthless management in the public sector. Well, I think that's one of the problems in the public sector. If there was a little bit more ruthless management, if there was a little bit more accountability, if there was a little bit more of, well, a little bit less actually, of this, you know what, you've done this terrible job, but don't worry about it. Here is your kind of golden handshake. Here is your payoff, and off you go. If there was a little bit less of that, you might see some better results. The flip side of all of this, by the way, is if you're working in a job centre, literally your job is to get other people a job. So getting rewarded for that in vouchers, some might say, is a little bit odd. I suspect that is the other side of the argument. Let me know your thoughts. Steve, you're a mind reader. You are, Steve. You've emailed exactly as I was just saying that, saying, let me get this straight, Michelle, you want to give people a bonus for doing their job. That, he says, is laughable. Is it? You give me your thoughts. I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere, because when I come back, I want to talk to you about rubbish, particularly bins, waste, recycling, all of it. Don't go anywhere. I'll see you in 2.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewbs and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Emma Burnell, the political consultant, and Toby Young, the director of the Free Speech Union. We've just been talking about so-called performance-related pay in the public sector. Doug says, Michelle, if you was a manager in the public sector, you'd be regarded as a bully. I'd probably be regarded as a lot of things, quite frankly, Doug, but I can bet my bottom dollar I'd get better results and better outcomes than a lot of what goes on there in the first place right now. Many of you have the regard that, no, you shouldn't have the performance-related pay because it's just because it is literally just people doing their job. It does seem to have divided you, I have to say. Matthew, though, says yes. He thinks it would be a great idea, particularly for the NHS. Richard says it would be a good idea to get rid of the benefit lifestyle culture I think you mean in there in terms of getting people into work. But Richard, the incentive there would be going to the job centre staff, not to the employee themselves. Ken says, what is this? You want to give me a reward for doing something good? I'm not a dog, you know. Well, there you go. Right, so let's move on, shall we? Let me talk rubbish to you before I head off, because your bin situation, I'm always intrigued by this. How many bins do you actually even have? And when it comes to going to the tip, how does it work where you live? Do you just rock up and off you go? Do you need a permit? Do you need an appointment? You might remember it was, I think, started during lockdown. Many of these places, tips I'm talking about, because of lockdown COVID, they introduced an appointment scheme, didn't they? And now in Essex, there's plans there to make this appointment only. And apparently almost 100% of residents have opposed it. You know, this whole recycling thing, the whole bin thing, I personally think it's a little bit out of control. I mean, how many bins does one single household need?
Yeah, we've just had our weekly collections changed to fortnightly collections. So we've all got these enormous bins outside our homes.
And I bet your council tax has gone up.
Of course it has.
Yeah.
In my borough, Ealing, in West London, they introduced this: you have to book if you want to take anything to the recycling centre during the lockdowns, because lots of people were taking advantage of the lockdown to have clear-outs and take stuff to the dump. And I thought, well, they'll lift it when the lockdown ends, but they haven't lifted it. And I think that my impression is that fly tipping has increased in my local area, and I suspect the two are connected. If you make it more difficult for people to go to the dump, if they have to make an appointment, if they have to keep that appointment and so forth, then they're going to be more likely to just dump stuff at the end of the street or outside their homes. So I think, you know, this is a mad thing for Essex Council to be thinking about doing, and I'm not surprised that 100% of the residents are opposed to it.
I can't stand fly tippers, though. I think, who do you think you are to pick up your dirty old mattress and deposit it at the end of someone's garden? Who do you think you are?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, Emma, your thoughts?
My local dump did introduce appointments during lockdown, and they've actually unintroduced them now. But it was partly a resource management thing. They just had, like, cars backing up for people queuing to get in. Local councils just have less money than they used to, and less resource. And I think that one of the balances to be found here is that if people are queuing because every sod's gone on a Sunday afternoon, then it is going to be a problem with fly tipping, because half of that queue will go, I'm not doing this, I'm going to go and dump it in someone's garden, as you say. So I think there's a balance to be found between maybe having some open spaces, times that people can go, but an awareness that you may end up in a big queue because those will be the popular times, and appointments where you can just go in and out.
I do think there's a fascinating element to a tip, though. I don't know whether or not all tips have them. There's like a side component where you can have a rummage in things that people have put there. I find that absolutely fascinating.
It drove my wife crazy. She would send me off to the dump with a bunch of my old stuff she wanted me to get rid of, and I'd come back with even more stuff that I'd got at the dump.
I love it. Lots of people are getting in touch, by the way, about that story that we touched on earlier, which is the school in Wakefield, the 4 lads that have been suspended for damaging a Quran. Many people are saying it's the school that are handling this wrong. You used to be, Toby, you set up, as we just discussed, a chain of free schools. If something like this has happened under your watch with one of your schools, how would you have dealt with it? How should a school respond?
Well, I think it's difficult, and I sympathise with the head teacher. I suspect that the reason he's suspended these 4 boys is not because he thinks they've done something so bad it warrants that kind of penalty. I expect it's for their own protection. They live in a community in a part of the world where there are going to be children in the playground who are going to take it upon themselves to punish these children for disrespecting their religion, their holy book. So I suspect, that's probably why he's done it. And so I think it's tough to criticise him without knowing all the facts.
And what about teachers' unions in these kind of situations? Because the unions, they're very vocal these days, aren't they? Very front foot on things. But I noticed when it was, for example, the Batley teacher, well, where were the unions there? There was nowhere to be seen. Where are the unions in these kind of situations? Do they have a role in this or not?
Well, I think they do have a role, and, they should be taking a leadership role in situations like this. But as you say, they should be, in the case of the Batley Grammar School teacher, he was, I think, a member of a teaching union, they were nowhere. I mean, they should be protecting their members from, you know, murderous mobs who are threatening to kill them, instead of just remaining completely silent about it in a kind of cowardly way.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, this has really got you guys talking. Carol says, Michelle, you need to be careful what you say. You'll be in danger of a backlash. I've got to say there, Carol, I'm really sorry, but I do think people need to speak out when you've got 14-year-old autistic children receiving death threats. I'm sorry, but I mean, that is just not on. It's not acceptable. People have to speak out against this. There is nobody in this country that has a right not to be offended. I certainly don't condone people going out of their way to try and offend people and all the rest of it. I completely respect the religions of others, but we live in a society where we're supposed to coexist. And I'm sorry, but turning a blind eye to kids being threatened is not going to happen on my watch. Many of you getting in touch as well, saying that you think the Secretary of State for Education should intervene and overrule the suspensions. Should she?
I mean, again, I like Toby. I don't know the details. I think there may be a problem if this is on their permanent record. If they've been suspended, as you suggest, perhaps for their own safety, that would worry me, because I don't think that something that's been done in order to protect them should also then harm them later on down the line. That's a real issue. Look, Michelle, we live in a pluralistic society. We should have the absolute right to disagree, to say things that each other disagree with. We should respect people's religion and their right to hold their own religion, but that religion does not have the right to encroach on my lifestyle or yours.
Yeah.
And that's where the line has to be drawn. And ultimately, that's how you live in a liberal society. You respect the rights of others, you respect other people, but you ultimately do not have the right to impose your values upon them.
Yeah, and Philip says, Michelle, you just don't understand. The head teacher is afraid. The unions are afraid. Everybody is afraid. Well, I'm not afraid to speak up in defence of 14-year-old autistic children. I don't think anyone should be. And quite frankly, Keir Starmer, wandering around, giving us all his 5-point plans and all the rest of it, he should be condemning Labour councillors that are trying to incite this violence, incite this division. It is wrong and it needs to be pushed back against. Lots of you as well get in touch about performance-related pay. Another Phil has been in touch saying, Michelle, if you say about being a boss in the public sector, you could be the boss, but all of your workers would resign. That's a bit harsh. Emma, thank you for your company. Toby, thank you for yours. You guys, very much thank you for yours. Have a wonderful evening and I'll see you tomorrow.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office. Cloudy and showery weather will continue for many of us over the next 24 hours. Showers will ease later, leading to a touch of frost in some places, but for most it stays cloudy because this area of high pressure, which is dominant across the UK at the moment, is continuing to bring a feed of cloud and some showers in from the North Sea. So the most frequent showers into the east and across central areas, but a few of them making their way into Wales and the southwest. However, the earlier showers and the longer spells of rain in Kent do tend to move away. Clearer skies moving in here overnight with the frost, and western Scotland, lengthy clear spells, so a frost here as well. But where we keep the cloud, 3 to 5 Celsius on the thermometer as we start off Wednesday. And we've still got further showers to come. They're going to continue to feed into northern and central England, southeast Scotland, parts of Wales, 1 or 2 into the southwest of England as well. But actually by the afternoon, many of these showers will ease. There'll be a better chance of some breaks in the cloud developing, some brighter spells, especially towards the south, the west, and more especially for western Scotland. 7 to 10 Celsius, not far from average for the time of year, but it'll feel more like 3 or 4 on that North Sea coast, given the breeze. That breeze will continue to bring some showers into the north and east of Scotland, northern and eastern England, 1 or 2 into Wales on Wednesday night. But actually, the best chance of clear spells is across southern counties of England, South Wales, northern and western Scotland. And it's here where we'll see a frost as we start off Thursday. Otherwise, 3 to 5 Celsius, a very similar picture compared with the last few days. A lot of cloud feeding in and a few showers. However, Thursday, I'm optimistic, does look like a brighter day for many, especially in the south and later on for Scotland as well. The cloud breaking up nicely. And by Friday, many places will be looking sunnier, although there'll still be areas of cloud floating about. Saturday, much colder weather sweeps into the far north.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's